Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and extract the most compelling knowledge and insights. Today, we are heading back to 1940, a really pivotal year. We're exploring a conflict that, honestly, started almost as a footnote. One dictator's vanity project, you could say.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But it unexpectedly became the first really resounding Axis defeat of World War II. We're diving deep into the Greco-Italian War.
And this conflict, kicking off in October 1940, it really was born out of just profound hubris. Mussolini, he conceived it as his guerra parallela, his parallel war.
Yeah.
He desperately needed a swift, glorious victory, something to show Hitler that Italy was, an equal partner, not just some subordinate ally.
Hi.
But what our sources really hammer home is that this desperate grab for prestige, it backfired spectacularly, turned into this massive humiliation that genuinely stunned the world. And importantly, it exposed just how brittle the core of the fascist military machine actually was.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really get a handle on this operation, we first have to grasp the sheer scale of Mussolini's ambition. He wasn't thinking small, was he?
No, not at all. He was completely driven by this quest for spazio vitale, Italian living space. It was this grand vision, almost unbelievable, of Italian dominance right across the Mediterranean, stretching, he imagined, from the Strait of Gibraltar all the way to the Strait of Hormuz.
Wow, that's huge. Gibraltar to Hormuz.
It's a staggering claim, isn't it? It means total control over the Mediterranean basin, and that inevitably included the Balkans.
Right.
So this vision, it led directly to a really critical step, annexing Albania back in April 1939.
Yeah.
That positioned Albania as the vital foothold, the springboard for any expansion into the rest of the peninsula. By late 1940, you have to remember the context, Europe was mostly dark. Under the Axis shadow, France had fallen, Britain was battered but holding on.
A very precarious time.
Extremely. And the fragile balance in the Balkans, that was clearly the next flashpoint. Mussolini was absolutely obsessed with grabbing his piece of the pie before Hitler finished conquering the continent.
So Greece becomes the target.
Exactly. Greece controlled key maritime supply routes, crucial ports. It was the logical, immediate target for Mussolini's ambition.
And the lead up to the war, it wasn't just bad diplomacy escalating, was it? The sources paint a picture of something much more deliberate.
Oh, absolutely deliberate. Manufactured, even. There was this intense anti-Greek press campaign being pushed hard in Italy. They were actively setting the stage.
How so? What were they claiming?
They just kept hammering away, accusing neutral Greece of being a secret British ally. Over and over again.
Was there any truth to that? Greece was neutral. Officially.
Officially neutral, yes. But they had allowed Britain to use their merchant fleet, which was significant, and their foreign policy certainly wasn't pro-Axis, so there were threads Mussolini could pull on.
Flimsy threads, though.
Very flimsy. He used these accusations to basically build the public and political mood for an invasion he'd frankly already decided on.
Okay, let's unpack this. This wasn't just a political spat. This was a deliberate campaign to destabilize a neutral nation.
Precisely. Using systematic state media propaganda, classic playboy stuff, really, to manufacture a casus belli, a reason for war.
And the pace of these provocations, it really picked up speed in the autumn of 1940, didn't it?
Yeah.
It seems like Mussolini's rivalry with Hitler was actually pushing the timeline.
Absolutely. That relationship, that rivalry, it was intensely personal and a huge factor. In October 1940, Hitler moved German troops into Romania. Just did it. Didn't tell Mussolini beforehand.
Unannounced.
Completely unannounced. The official reason was to guard the Ploiade oil fields, which were vital. But Mussolini saw it as this massive, humiliating snub.
Like Germany stepping into his backyard.
Exactly. What he considered the Italian sphere of influence in Southeast Europe. He felt he absolutely had to launch his own campaign immediately to, reassert Italy's status, show Hitler he could act decisively too. He actually said something quite revealing.
Oh.
He remarked, "Hitler always faces me with a fait accompli. This time I'm going to repay him in his own coin. He will find out from the newspapers that I have occupied Greece."
Wow. So it was partly just spite and ego.
A huge part of it, yes. He rushed the plan, which meant he needed a quick justification, a pretext.
And this is where that Dot Hoxha incident comes in. You mentioned propaganda.
Oh, it's breathtakingly cynical.
Yeah.
Dot Hoxha, he was a known figure in Albania, described basically as a bandit, a cattle thief with a history of violence. He gets murdered by a rival Albanian gang, nothing to do with Greece.
Okay, so internal Albanian dispute.
Right. But Mussolini's foreign minister, Ciano, and the viceroy in Albania, Giacomoni, they immediately seize on it. They cooked up this narrative, presented Hoxha to Mussolini as some kind of pro-Italian Albanian patriot, ruthlessly murdered by Greek agents.
Unbelievable.
It gave Mussolini exactly the public outrage, the internal momentum he needed to just accelerate the invasion plans he already had. A textbook example of propaganda fabrication.
But there was another incident, wasn't there? Something that really hit home with the Greek people months earlier, unifying them in a way maybe nothing else could have.
Ah, yes. That was the sinking of the Greek light cruiser Ellie. August 15th, 1940. A huge religious holiday in Greece, the Dormition of the Theotokos.
The Dormition, right.
The Ellie was anchored peacefully in Tinos Harbor, participating in the feast day celebrations, and then torpedoed by the Italian submarine Delfino.
Blatant during a religious festival.
Utterly blatant, a calculated act of aggression against a neutral country. Now, the Greek government under Metaxas, they were desperate to maintain neutrality, avoid immediate war, so they publicly claimed the submarine's nationality was unknown.
Even though they probably knew.
Oh, everyone knew. The public certainly knew exactly who was responsible. The Italian ambassador, Grazzi, he actually noted how this single act outraged and unified the Greek people, really galvanized them for resistance.
So that simmering anger, that unity, it all comes to a head on that dramatic night. October 28th, 1940.
Indeed. 3 o'clock in the morning, pitch dark. Mussolini's ultimatum is delivered right to the Greek premier, Ioannis Metaxas, at his home.
And the terms.
Impossible. Just completely impossible. Demanding free passage for Italian troops to occupy strategic points inside Greece, effectively demanding Greece just surrender its sovereignty on the spot.
No negotiation, just demands.
Exactly. And Metaxas' response, delivered diplomatically in French, the language of diplomacy then, it's become this ultimate symbol of defiance.
What do you say?
Concise, definitive. Alors c'est la guerre. Then it is war.
Then it is war.
But the sentiment that truly electrified the nation, the response that became this eternal rallying cry that echoes even today, it was just one single Greek word. Ochi, no. It wasn't just a political decision by one man. It felt like the voice of an entire unified nation refusing point blank to bow to fascist bullying.
That refusal, that ochi, it meant war was immediate, didn't it?
Instantaneous. The Greek general staff announced it simply, starkly, over the radio moments later. Since 05.3 this morning, the enemy is attacking our vanguard. Our forces are defending the fatherland. The invasion had already begun. Now we really need to dig into the core reason why this became the Axis's first major setback. And honestly, it boils down to the sheer, almost unbelievable incompetence of the Italian strategic planning. Our sources paint a truly devastating picture here.
You're talking about that key meeting, right? October 15th in Rome, the one described by a leading historian as...
What was it?
One of the most superficial and dilettantish discussions of high-risk military strategy ever recorded. That says it all, doesn't it?
It absolutely sets the tone. The Italian war plan, it was just dripping with superficial confidence. The goal, capture Epirus, that's northwestern Greece, in maybe 10 to 15 days, tops. Then pave the way for a triumphal march on Athens.
10 to 15 days, that's ambitious.
Wildly optimistic. And the commander chosen, Sebastiano Visconti Prasca, he seemed more interested in personal glory, maybe getting that Marshal of Italy rank, than in the actual realities on the ground.
So he underestimated what was needed.
Drastically. He insisted only 5 or 6 divisions would be enough for the job, after securing Epirus.
Only 5 or 6.
Yeah. And this was directly against the warnings of Marshal Badoglio, the chief of staff, who correctly said, look, to conquer the entire country, given the mountains, given the likely Greek resolve, you'd need a minimum of 20 divisions. 20.
So Prasca ignored the top military advice.
Actively suppressed it, it seems. He wanted to keep the command structure lean, focused on this quick, glorious win, he imagined, anything to boost his own standing.
And it wasn't just about troop numbers, was it? The logistics were apparently a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, crippled from the start. Logistics were virtually non-existent.
Wow.
And this was made worse by a completely bizarre decision Mussolini made months earlier.
What that?
He'd ordered the demobilization of nearly 300,000 troops for the autumn harvest.
Demobilize them.
Yeah.
Right before planning an invasion.
Exactly. Troops, and crucially, the transport trucks, mules that were absolutely vital for invading mountainous territory. So they tried to launch this massive invasion through the rugged, road-starved Pindus Mountains with severely inadequate transport, not enough pack animals, fragile supply lines. The plan basically ignored the ground itself.
Just pure arrogance meeting geography. And this Italian overconfidence, it ran straight into Greek defensive thinking, didn't it? Even if the Greek high command was initially pessimistic.
Yes. While the top brass in Athens were worried, the local commander in Epirus, General Charalambos Katsimitros, he showed brilliant foresight. Real tactical smarts.
What did he do differently?
Katsimitros basically ignored the generalized plan from Athens, which involved a sort of gradual withdrawal. Instead, he insisted on defending a specific fortified line, the Kalpaki line.
Okay.
And critically, he used the local terrain, specifically the low-lying swamps created by the Kalamas River near the line.
Swamps. How did that help?
It was a stroke of genius. Those swamps immediately neutralized the main Italian advantage, their tanks. The Lancia 3.0 tanks, the Caravaggio tanks, they just couldn't operate effectively in that marshy ground.
So the tanks got bogged down. Literally.
Literally. It forced the Italians to rely solely on infantry assaults, funneled through narrow, difficult mountain corridors where the Greek defenders held all the high ground, all the advantages. The entire initial Italian strategic edge, their mechanized superiority, just rendered useless by a river and a swamp.
Incredible. Now let's talk about the terrain itself, that Pindus mountain range.
Yeah.
It's not exactly easy going.
No. We're talking about a front only about 90 miles wide, but it's entirely mountain ranges, jagged peaks, deep ravines. And then you throw in the weather, the worst imaginable weather.
So that terrain, it essentially became the graveyard for the fascist plan.
Absolutely. The main Italian thrust involved their elite unit, the 3rd Alpine Division, Giulia, about 10,800 men, supposedly the best mountain troops Italy had.
And their objective.
Their goal was to punch right through the heart of the Pindus Mountains, capture the strategic town of Metsovo. If they did that, they'd effectively cut off the Greek forces fighting in Epirus from the Greek forces over in Western Macedonia. Split the Greek army in two. High risk, high reward.
And the sources, they really emphasize the weather, don't they? Almost like another character in the story.
Oh, vividly. The attack began under punishing torrential rainfall, just relentless downpours. The mountain tracks turned instantly into quagmires of mud. Motor transport just ground to a halt, useless.
And then it got worse.
Yeah.
Then, very quickly, the freezing onset of snowfall, heavy snow. So the Giulia Division, these elite Alpine troops, they were essentially marching, fighting in conditions designed to break even the toughest soldiers. They pushed forward about 25 miles through icy rain and snow, but they were utterly exhausted, and their supply lines, already stretched thin, just completely evaporated behind them. No food, no ammunition getting through. And opposing this elite, but now struggling, Italian division was who?
Initially, just the Greek Pindus detachment, a much smaller force. Only about 2,000 men assigned to hold a vast 37-kilometer front over that incredibly broken terrain.
2,000 against nearly 11,000.
Yes, heavily outnumbered. But their local knowledge, their sheer determination, it proved decisive. By November 3rd, the Greeks had managed to rush reinforcements to the area.
And wasn't there crucial civilian support too?
Absolutely invaluable. Relentless support from the local Greek civilians. Men, women, even children. They helped carry supplies, ammunition, evacuate wounded, guide troops. They knew every single goat track, every hidden path, every vantage point. They were fighting on home ground, defending their homes.
That combination, military grit and total civilian mobilization, must have been formidable.
It was simply unstoppable for the Italians. By November 13th, the Greeks had counterattacked and recaptured the critical mountain ranges of Grammos and Smolikas. The Giulia Division, remember, the spearhead, the elite fascist fighting force. It was virtually wiped out as an organized combat unit, just disintegrated under the pressure, the conditions, and the Greek attacks.
Wow. So that rapid, total defeat of an elite Italian division by a smaller, supposedly weaker army, that's really the first major land defeat for the Axis in the war, isn't it?
It absolutely is. The first significant repulse suffered by any Axis power in World War II. A stunning reversal.
So the Giulia division is shattered. What's the reaction back in Rome? Panic.
Pretty much. Panic and scapegoating. Visconti Prosca, the commander who'd been so confident, he was recalled immediately. Sacked. General Ubaldo Soddu took over command.
And so he had a more realistic view.
Oh, yes. He immediately saw how serious the situation was. His reports back to Rome were sobering, brutally honest. He confirmed the Greek tenacious resistance, as he put it, and flatly stated they needed massive reinforcements. Perhaps more tellingly, he recommended they assume defensive positions. Stop attacking.
So basically admitting the initial invasion had failed.
Completely. Mussolini was forced to concede, at least temporarily, halt the offensive momentum. The whole plan was in tatters.
But the Greeks didn't just stop there, did they? They saw their chance.
They absolutely pressed their advantage. This Italian disarray created the perfect window for the Greek counteroffensive, which kicked off around November 14th, 1940.
How are they able to launch a major counterattack so quickly? Weren't they also stretched?
They were, but the Greek high command had made a crucial strategic move earlier. They'd secured assurances from Bulgaria that Bulgaria would remain neutral.
Ah, that freed up troops from the Bulgarian border.
Exactly. It was a huge gamble, leaving that border potentially vulnerable, but it allowed them to rapidly shift the bulk of their army divisions normally stationed to watch Bulgaria over to the Albanian front.
A calculated risk that paid off.
Immediately. By mid-November, the numbers on the ground had swung dramatically. You suddenly had the Greeks with over 100 infantry battalions fighting on familiar, mountainous terrain, facing fewer than 50 demoralized Italian battalions.
And their advance was quick.
Remarkably quick initially, they started driving the Italians deep back into Albania, the country Italy had used as its launch pad. The capture of the Corsi Plateau between November 14th and 23rd, that was a really significant early breakthrough. It punched a hole in the Italian lines.
So Corsi falls. What was the next big objective?
Following Corsi, the Greek GHQ general headquarters, they set their sights on a prize that could potentially cripple the entire Italian war effort in Albania, the strategic port of Valona.
Valona. Why was that so critical?
Because Valona was one of the two main ports Italy was using to supply its army. If the Greeks captured Valona, it would severely restrict the Italian supply chain, leaving them really only with Durrës further north as a main entry point for the whole front.
Cutting the supply lines.
Yeah.
Smart.
The Greeks knew logistics would be decisive in the long run, especially in those mountains, so the advance continued. Girocaster, another key town, fell on December 8th. Then Himari on the coast fell on December 22nd. They were pushing hard, achieving major strategic objectives on enemy-occupied soil.
The contrast between the two armies at this point, December 1940, January 41, it sounds almost stark.
It really was. The Italian logistical crisis was just abysmal. Soldiers lacked proper winter gear boots, coats in freezing mountain conditions. There were severe shortages of food, ammunition. The newly designed binary divisions with only 2 infantry regiments instead of 3 proved too weak and inflexible for sustained mountain fighting. And morale, it absolutely plummeted.
What were the Italian soldiers saying?
Privately, they were calling it a second and worse Caporetto. That's a direct reference to Italy's catastrophic, humiliating defeat against the Austrians and Germans in World War I. It shows how bad things felt.
And the Greeks.
The Greeks had huge advantages, beyond just numbers at that point. Superior familiarity with mountain warfare as their backyard, intimate local knowledge, as we said, and remarkably, some of their older imported weapons, things like the Czech Skoda mountain artillery, the French Hotchkiss machine guns, they actually performed better and more reliably in the freezing wet conditions than the newer Italian equipment.
What's fascinating here is how sheer human resolve and, knowing the land just overcame the supposed textbook military superiority of a modern industrialized army. It really defined the fight.
It absolutely did. And this Italian failure, this collapse in morale and capability, it really hit rock bottom during the incredibly bitter struggle for Klizura Pass in January 1941.
Klizura Pass. Why was that specific spot so important?
It was strategically vital. It controlled a key route through the mountains, essentially the spine connecting central Albania. Whoever held Klizura Pass had a major advantage in controlling movement along that whole central sector of the front.
And this is where we see that story, the Italian Lupi di Toscana division, right? The Wolves of Tuscany. Sounds like a disaster for them.
An absolute catastrophe, and a perfect illustration of the failures in fascist command and logistics. The Lupi di Toscana were a newly arrived division rushed to the front lines.
How were they deployed?
After a grueling, forced 24-hour march in horrendous winter weather, they arrived exhausted. They were thrown into battle with zero time for reconnaissance, no adequate maps of the area they were supposed to attack, and critically, without properly coordinated artillery fire support.
So completely unprepared.
And worse, the logistical failure compounded everything. They lacked enough mules and other pack animals. In the Pindus terrain, where trucks were useless off the few poor roads, mules were the only way to move heavy weapons, ammunition, food, medical supplies up to the front lines.
Without mules, they couldn't sustain themselves.
Exactly. The division was effectively crippled before it even fired a shot in anger. They were sent in to try and support the remnants of the struggling Julia Division and other units, but they were just routed, utterly routed. Within days of going into action, the Lupi di Toscana Division essentially ceased to exist as an organized force. They suffered over 4,000 casualties killed, wounded, captured, missing. A whole division just wiped out.
And the Greeks took the pass.
The Greeks captured Klysura Pass. It was a major tactical and operational victory for them, and another deep humiliation for the Italians.
After this string of disasters Julia wiped out, Lupi di Toscana routed. Losing Corse, Girocastir, Klysura Pass, Mussolini must have been furious, desperate even.
Absolutely desperate, which led him to decide he had to personally intervene to launch one more major push, the Italian Spring Offensive.
He went there himself.
Yes, from March 9th through the 24th, 1941. Mussolini actually flew to Albania to personally oversee this last-ditch 2-week assault. The main aim was to recapture Klysura Pass and, frankly, just restore some shred of Italian military prestige.
What was the offensive like?
The intensity was immense. Focused on a very narrow front, they dropped over 100,000 artillery shells on a mere 6-kilometer stretch of the Greek lines, held primarily by the Greek 1st Division. Just a massive concentrated bombardment.
100,000 shells trying to blast their way through.
Exactly, with the Deuce himself watching from a nearby vantage point.
But the Greeks?
The Greeks held firm. They absolutely refused to break. Despite the colossal artillery barrage, despite repeated Italian infantry assaults.
And the cost?
The cost to Italy was astronomical for zero gain. Over 11,800 Italian dead and wounded in those 2 weeks, compared to only about 12,243 Greek casualties.
That's almost a 10-to-1 ratio in casualties.
A devastating ratio. The offensive achieved absolutely nothing of strategic value. Klysura Pass remained firmly in Greek hands. Mussolini was forced to fly back to Rome in utter humiliation. He privately admitted, apparently, that the result of his grand personal effort was zero.
Zero.
Zero. The Italian military machine in Albania was officially exhausted, demoralized, and comprehensively defeated by the Greek army.
Okay, so by early spring 1941, Greece has achieved these extraordinary victories. Tactically brilliant, morally huge, psychologically devastating for Italy. They've pushed the invaders deep back into Albania.
But there's always a but, isn't there? We need to address the grim reality facing the Greeks themselves at this point. Absolutely. That success came at an immense price. By the end of March 1941, the Greek army, despite its victories, was dangerously depleted, critically low on pretty much everything.
Like what specifically?
Uniforms, boots soldiers were fighting in rags in the snow, medical supplies were running out, and crucially, ammunition. Estimates suggest they had less than 2 months of artillery ammunition left at the current rate of expenditure.
2 months? That's running on fumes.
Completely. And manpower was stretched thin, too. Out of their roughly 20 available divisions, 14 were totally tied up just holding the line against the Italians in the Albanian mountains. That left their northern border, the border with Bulgaria, dangerously exposed. They were victorious against Italy, yes, but utterly spent. Exhausted.
And this exhaustion, this material depletion, it coincides with Hitler losing patience, right? Watching his main European ally getting comprehensively beaten wasn't just embarrassing, it was becoming a strategic problem for Germany.
A major strategic nightmare for the Axis. Hitler couldn't afford this ongoing failure, especially with his own plans well underway for the massive invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. He needed his southern flank, the Balkans, secured, stable. Not a messy, ongoing conflict where his ally was losing.
And there was the British factor too, wasn't there?
Yes, that was the final tipping point for Hitler, the increasing British commitment to Greece, codenamed W-Force. It wasn't huge, a few divisions, some RAF squadrons, but its presence was seen as an unacceptable strategic threat.
Why specifically?
Because if the Allies managed to establish proper forward air bases in Greece, their bombers could potentially reach and strike the Pleiai oil fields in Romania.
Ah, the oil. Always the oil.
Those oil fields were absolutely vital. They fueled the German war machine, especially the panzers and Luftwaffe needed for Barbarossa. Hitler could not risk them being threatened. So the Balkans had to be stabilized, secured, and Allied influence eliminated immediately.
Which led directly to Operation Merida. Germany steps in.
Operation Merida, launched April 6, 1941. The Germans didn't come through Albania. They came through Bulgaria, Italy's reluctant ally, launching a full-scale modern blitzkrieg invasion into northern Greece. This created that fatal second front the Greeks simply couldn't handle.
What about the Greek defenses on that border, the Metaxas line? It had a fearsome reputation.
It was an impressive chain of fortifications, yes, built along the Bulgarian border, but it was designed to be held by around 200,000 men. On April 6th, it was manned by less than 70,000 troops, many of them exhausted from the Albanian campaign or poorly equipped reservists.
So undermanned.
Severely undermanned, and facing elite German mountain divisions, panzer divisions, and overwhelming Luftwaffe air support. The Germans, using infiltration tactics and pinpoint dive bombing, quickly bypassed or overwhelmed Metaxas line within just a few days.
And this trapped the main Greek army.
Exactly. It trapped the main body of the Greek forces, the ones who had fought so brilliantly against the Italians in Albania. They were now caught between the Germans advancing from the north and east, and the Italians, eager for revenge, pressing from the west in Albania.
A hopeless situation. Did the Greek high command order a retreat?
Yes, the GHQ in Athens ordered a desperate retreat from the Albanian front on April 12th, try to pull back, regroup, but the commanders on the ground, they knew it was hopeless.
Why, too late?
Far too late. The troops were starving, literally starving. They had almost no motor transport left, very few pack animals. The terrain was still mountainous and difficult. Any attempt at an orderly retreat under German air attack and with the Italians pursuing would instantly dissolve into a chaotic, bloody collapse, complete disintegration.
So the commanders faced a terrible choice.
A terrible choice. They realized the only way to save the army from utter annihilation, to spare their exhausted, starving troops further pointless suffering, was to arrange a surrender.
And this is where that final, extraordinary diplomatic act comes in. The refusal to surrender to the Italians.
It's one of the most remarkable, and for Italy, humiliating moments of the entire war. Desperate to, quote, save the army from the Italians, the Greek commanders on the Albanian front, led by Lieutenant General Georgios Solokoglu, decided to act independently.
They bypassed their own government.
They bypassed their own general headquarters in Athens, and they deliberately sought out the Germans. They insisted on surrendering directly to the commander of the advancing German forces, specifically to Sepp Dietrich, the commander of Hitler's elite bodyguard unit, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, LSSAH.
Surrendering to the SS, why them specifically?
It was a calculated political statement. By surrendering to Hitler's most trusted elite guard, the Greeks were symbolically acknowledging the Germans as the actual victors, the ones who had defeated them, while treating the Italians, the original aggressors they had fought off for 6 months, as basically irrelevant. A negligible force in their final defeat. It was a monumental snub.
Mussolini must have been absolutely incandescent with rage.
Oh, furious! The Italians protested vehemently. This was the ultimate insult after months of humiliation. Hitler, though, needed to maintain at least the facade of Axis unity, especially with Barbarossa looming.
So what happened?
He had to smooth things over. Hitler insisted that a second formal armistice be re-signed 3 days later, on April 23, 1941. This time, the signing ceremony included German, Italian, and Greek representatives.
Forcing the Greeks to acknowledge Italy.
Exactly. But that enforced ritual, that second signing, was itself the final, clear demonstration of Italy's true status. Utterly reduced to a German satellite state. So humiliated they couldn't even properly accept the surrender of the enemy they had spectacularly failed to defeat on their own. After that, Greece was tragically carved up into German, Italian, and Bulgarian occupation zones, beginning a period of terrible hardship.
So, despite the eventual collapse under the German onslaught, the Greco-Italian War itself, that initial 6 months of resistance, the Epic of 40, as it's known in Greece, its symbolic triumph, remains incredibly profound, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It was a crucial psychological victory at a moment when the Axis seemed utterly invincible across Europe. It sent a powerful message.
What was that message?
That the Axis could be resisted, that they weren't infallible. It provided this desperately needed rallying cry for the Allies and for occupied peoples everywhere. Winston Churchill's tribute at the time really captured it, didn't he?
The famous quote.
Yeah. Henceforth, we will not say that Greeks fight like heroes, but that heroes fight like Greeks. That captures the impact it had. And that moment of defiance, October 28th, Ohai Day, it's still celebrated with huge national pride in Greece today. They showed the world the Axis could be beaten.
And conversely, for fascist Italy, the impact was just as profound, but entirely negative. It wasn't just a military defeat, it shook the regime itself.
Oh, deeply. It deepened what historians call the most serious crisis for the fascist regime internally. The sheer humiliation in Greece, which happened alongside other disasters like the British Navy crippling the Italian fleet at Taranto, and simultaneous military reversals against the British in North Africa, all this confirmed Italy's reduction to just being a German puppet state.
Did it cause political problems for Mussolini at home?
Huge problems. It led to profound political resentment, not just among the general public suffering from wartime rationing and bad news, but crucially within the fascist hierarchy itself. Senior figures like Dino Grandi, who later helped depose Mussolini, noted that this period, marked by military humiliation after humiliation, represented the regime's most serious political crisis since the early days in 1924. It planted seeds of doubt and dissent right at the top.
Okay, now we get to the big controversial debate, the high-stakes analysis of this war's broader strategic impact, specifically the Barbarossa blame game. Did the Greek campaign derail Hitler's invasion of Russia?
This is where the arguments get really heated among historians, and it goes right back to Hitler himself. Adolf Hitler was furious, absolutely furious at having to divert crucial resources, panzers, Luftwaffe squadrons, elite mountain troops, and precious time to sort out Mussolini's mess in the Balkans.
And he blamed Italy directly for problems in Russia.
Directly and furiously. He claimed, and repeated it later, "But for the difficulties created for us by the Italians and their idiotic campaign in Greece, I should have attacked Russia a few weeks earlier." He argued this Balkan diversion caused a catastrophic delay to Operation Barbarossa, pushing the start date back by several crucial weeks, maybe 5 or 6.
And the implication is that those lost weeks meant the German army got caught by the brutal Russian winter just short of Moscow.
That's precisely the argument, that Greek resistance, by forcing German intervention, bought critical time for the Soviets to prepare and, more importantly, ensure the Germans would hit the wall of general winter before achieving their objectives.
It's a compelling argument, but there's a strong counterview, isn't there?
Yeah.
That Hitler was maybe looking for a scapegoat.
Exactly. Many serious historians argue that blaming the Balkan campaign for the delay is an oversimplification, or even just Hitler deflecting blame for his own strategic miscalculations regarding Russia.
What's their reasoning?
They point out that Hitler had already set a tentative invasion date for Russia, May 15th, well before the Balkan situation fully blew up, and that date was delayed anyway, primarily due to logistical realities. The Wehrmacht just wasn't fully ready. And perhaps even more importantly, the weather. There was unusually wet weather across Eastern Europe in May 1941. Record rainfall turned the roads and fields in Poland and Western Russia into impassable mud.
Okay, so the direct causal link to the timing of Barbarossa might be debatable. But what about the resources? Did the Balkan campaign divert forces that could have been used elsewhere, say North Africa?
Now that is much harder to dispute. Without a doubt, the resources poured into stabilizing the Balkans. First, the Greek campaign, then the subsequent invasion of Yugoslavia, which happened concurrently, were enormous.
How enormous?
The analytical data is pretty stark. If you look at the period between October 1940 and May 1941, the Axis, mostly Germany, by the end deployed something like 5 times as many ground troops to the Balkan theater as they did to the absolutely critical North African campaign during that exact same period.
5 times as many men.
Yes. Plus massive amounts of material, fuel, and critically merchant shipping and naval escort vessels needed to sustain the Balkan operations. All of that was diverted away from North Africa, where Rommel was crying out for more tanks, more supplies, more troops.
So the argument is the Greek campaign starved the North African front at a crucial time.
It fundamentally harmed the Axis position there, yes. It meant the Axis lost its early numerical and material advantage in North Africa, just as Rommel was trying to push towards Egypt. It forced Germany into an extended, very costly commitment in the Balkans, and later, fighting partisans in Yugoslavia and Greece, which continued to drain resources thin across multiple major fronts: Russia, the Med, North Africa. That diversion of resources is undeniable.
So what we've really seen today in this deep dive is this incredible clash, one dictator's monumental hubris, his vanity project, crashing headlong into another nation's popular, almost visceral, desperate refusal. Okay. It became this spectacular mismatch, Italian incompetence versus Greek grit, where knowing the terrain, having superior morale, just proved more decisive, didn't it, than the supposed technical superiority of a modern fascist army.
It really did. The Greco-Italian War, before the Germans arrived, it genuinely provided this foundational moment of moral victory for the Allied world. It showed, right when things looked darkest, that the Axis powers were vulnerable. They were beatable. They were capable of just spectacular operational failure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the Greco-Italian War, regardless of the Barbarossa timing debate, it fundamentally forced a pivot, didn't it? It obligated Germany to commit critical resources. It definitely impacted strategic timelines, maybe most significantly in North Africa.
Absolutely. And it ruthlessly exposed just how brittle, how poorly led the core of the Italian military machine really was. It shattered the myth of fascist competence. And beyond the military, it gave the Allied world this powerful moral touchstone, the enduring image of that small nation saying no, the power of Oci.
So the Greek army, against all odds, achieved incredible tactical victories, a huge moral victory, and arguably significant strategic victories by bleeding Italy and diverting Germany, influencing the trajectory of the early war.
They absolutely did, which inevitably raises an important, maybe difficult question, something for you, the listener, to consider.
Okay.
The psychological and strategic damage inflicted on the Axis, particularly Italy, was undeniable. Huge! But the ultimate cost for Greece was immense. Years of brutal, starving occupation followed the German invasion. So the question is, was the strategic time bought, the resources diverted, by that incredible Greek sacrifice ultimately worth the terrible price of the occupation that followed?
The French.
Was the intangible moral victory, the sheer psychological damage dealt to the Axis myth of invincibility? Maybe that was the most valuable, the most enduring outcome of all.